Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 52nd episode of the BITTechTalks. I'm Greg Greenlee. I'm your host, along with my co-host, Ayore Selassie. This is a podcast where we, the engineers or techies, are in total control as we guide you on a technologically filled journey through the vastness of space and time. This week, we are actually highlighting hardware hackers. So this podcast is Raspberries and Robots, where we talk to two individuals who are hacking the hardware. Tonight we have Dr. Andrew Williams, a professor at Marquette University, and we have Don C. Hayes, a founder of Cool Labs. And we're going to talk to them a little bit about how they are hacking the hardware. And I wanted to do this podcast because there's been a lot of focus on coding. A lot of organizations are focused on coding as well. And I just wanted to give people who work with the hardware a chance to tell us about their experiences with robotics, with Raspberry Pis, with Arduinos. So we're going to get into that in a bit. If this is your first time listening, you can check out our growing community of Blacks in Technology at www.blacksintechnology.net. BIT is definitely growing. I think from the last podcast, we've had quite a few members signed up. So now we're over 1,160-something registered members on the site. So sign up, join, engage. It's free to join. Lots of spirited, informative discussions going on, everything from career advice, information on technology happenings, programming, networking, any types of tech goodness that you want to hear about or talk about, we have it on the site. Like I mentioned last week, we started an RSC channel. That stands for Internet Relay Chat. It's called BITTechTalk. We're on freenode.org. So if you want to join us in the chat, check us out there. Also, we have an embedded IRC client as well on the site. So if you go to blacksintechnology.net and click on chat at the top, you can actually get to our IRC channel from there. Check out our technology blog, BitTech Digest at bitdigest.net. Follow us on Twitter. That's at Black in Technology. That's BLKINTECHNOLOGY. And we also have a LinkedIn group, which is approaching over 1,400 members, which is exciting as well. So go check us out on LinkedIn. Just do a search for Blacks in Technology. And if you want to get us, contact us in any other way, you can email us to contact us at Blacks in Technology. Also, if you're following us on Twitter, if you're listening to the podcast right now and you want to tweet some questions, use the hashtag BITTechTalk. That's BITTechTalk. And I think we're going to go ahead. Oh, what's going on, Ayore? I know you just ran from boot camp, so how's it going on the West Coast?
It's going great, Greg. Glad to be here. I'm super excited every time to interview our awesome guests. Very excited about Dawn and Andrew and the Raspberry Pis and Arduinos. This is going to be great.
Excellent. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to introduce our guests. First up, we're going to actually introduce Dr. Andrew Williams. And Dr. Andrew Williams is a professor at Marquette University. He is the first African-American to earn his PhD in engineering from the University of Kansas. He is a professor and a distinguished chair in electrical and computer engineering at Marquette University, where he directs the Humanoid Engineering and Intelligent Robotics Lab. That's HEIR. For those that like acronyms, Dr. Williams founded the Spelman College Spellbots as a group of 6 African-American young women, and they competed in the International RoboCup robot soccer team. He's also a former senior engineering diversity manager at Apple, and he is the author of Out of the Box, Building Robots, Transforming Lives. Thank you for joining us tonight, Dr. Williams. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks. I'm very honored to be here.
Great. Our next guest is Dawn C. Hayes. She is the founder of Cool Labs. That's coollabs.org. She's a tinker. She educates and explores the emergent media arts and technology as facilitators of public engagement. She runs the startup Cool Labs and shares quirky tidbits as an adjunct instructor at York College and Queensborough Community College. She is committed to the exploration of the intersection of community interaction, design, informal learning, and innovation literacy. Dawn holds a bachelor's degree from Muskingum College and has pursued postgraduate studies at Columbia University and NYU. Thanks a lot for joining us tonight, Dawn. How are you doing?
Very good. Very well. Warm.
Warm? Yeah, you're in Austin right now, right?
That's right.
I wish I was in Austin right now, actually. So we're going to start with Dr. Williams. I did a little introduction, but tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in technology.
Well, I've always had an interest in science fiction, particularly TV shows that had robots in them. And also, I was in junior high when video games came out, like Asteroids and Pac-Man, and I was very interested in not only just playing the games, but actually how I could build a computer that would play those games and write the software. And so I ended up getting my electrical engineering degree and worked a while in industry and worked at GE Healthcare for a while in the Edison engineering program, and decided in the mid-'90s when the first .com boom was happening that I didn't see that many African Americans going out to Silicon Valley and having startups and becoming instant millionaires. And I was thinking about and praying about what I could do to help with that situation, and decided that I would attempt to become a professor and help train the next generation of technologists who could start businesses as well as create new inventions.
Excellent. I think that's very, very admirable because a lot of people would have opted to, run to Silicon Valley and try their hand in the startup world, but instead you said, hey, I'm going to educate the next generation and help them be and become the next creators and innovators. So I think that's very admirable.
Thanks.
What about you, Dawn? Tell us about your background in tech and how you got started.
Oh, let's see. Well, I guess that you could trace it back to when I was young, like 4 years young. I guess like a lot of kids, I was interested in playing, but I also like to basically take stuff apart, and sometimes I put it back together again. It worked. Sometimes I didn't. And, when I was really young, my parents encouraged me in that, which is pretty awesome because they'd open up the refrigerator and find all sorts of crazy things in. They were supposed to do my chemistry potions, and, they were really, really cool about it. It was strange. But, as I got older, I like a lot of people, you kind of thinking about how you're going to sort of really make money. And so the tinkering kind of fell to the wayside. And, I went to college and studied, the I guess, safe subjects. But, like Dr. Williams, I also had been involved in the startups and first .com wave. And, I don't know that I necessarily was thinking about African Americans as technologists are going to Silicon Valley, but I was curious about the role that we played or how we were perceived as entrepreneurs in some of this. At the time I was calling it Next Economy Ventures, and having gone in background from working for a bit on Wall Street and working with startups and really seeing some of the things that didn't develop for quite a while. One of the companies I worked with had their own content management system before people really knew what a CMS was, and that was interesting to me. But, over time, I started becoming more interested in getting back into tinkering, wondering not necessarily how to make a career of it, although it's nice to be able to, teach classes that are based on this stuff and actually get paid for it. But it was interesting to me because I found that emergent media arts and technology has the power to, invoke curiosity. And there's something about being able to, look under the hood, if you will, of something and being able to make it do what you want or to even envision something differently. So that's been a compelling interest for me, is to use those things to encourage communities to think a little bit more intentionally about what happens around them and how you can do it sometimes in playful ways, not just telling people what they should do or go and get this degree because then you'll make a lot of money, but just being more curious. And so, I've been back into tinkering since maybe about 2009 and really have been concerned with how education plays a role in these things, but also how we can sort of shape our communities through these things. So, kind of a circuitous path, but something that I guess I wouldn't have it any other way. It's kind of typical of Generation Xers. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Really interesting story there. So, Dr. Williams, tell us about, because you work with robotics, and a lot of people, they might not even know what robotics is, right? So give us a little bit, give us your definition of what is robotics and tell us about your work in the field.
Okay, so there's different types of robotics. And traditionally, robots are thought of machines that do tasks that are dirty, dangerous, and dull, such as manufacturing robots that help make cars.
Mm-hmm.
But the kind of robots I'm interested in is the next generation of robots, and that's socially intelligent robots, particularly humanoid robots, kind of like the robots on the Will Smith movie I, Robot. So
nice.
Consumer robots that will assist people with tasks in their homes or in other situations. Not too long ago, Bill Gates wrote an article, I believe it was in Scientific American, that was titled "A Robot in Every Home." And here's a person that had, one of the people that had the vision of having a personal computer in everyone's home at a time when a lot of people didn't think that was possible. He also articulated a vision of how everyone's eventually going to have a personal computer in their home, personal robot in their home. And so that's the kind of technology that we're researching. We've 3D printed a teen-size humanoid robot called Emulate, MU-L8, MU standing for Marquette University, but also Emulate because we want this robot to be able to emulate human behavior and actions and emotions. And so that's the kind of robots that we're working on now, including using humanoid robots to do things in healthcare. One of the things that we're trying to address in our community is childhood obesity. And so we're doing research with humanoid robots that can interactively dialogue with and coach kids in exercise and nutrition.
Wow, that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole AI, all those concepts around AI and artificial intelligence, I think it's so important because I feel like that when people think about the future and they think about science and technology and what's most interesting about it to them, it becomes things like robotics. So if you really want to encourage folks to pursue careers in STEM, I think those are the exact types of concepts that we need to bring up more often and make it seem, accessible and real. It's not just a conversation. They need to see people like you, Andrew, and what you're doing with your team so that they can see that it's something that they could do themselves.
Yeah, I agree with you. So it's interesting that a lot of people aren't aware that our U.S. government's actually kind of going full steam ahead with trying to build intelligent humanoid robots. currently they have the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency has a challenge called the Robotics Challenge, where universities and companies are competing at trying to build humanoids that can jump into a car, drive it to a site such as like the one they had in Japan where the nuclear reactor had a meltdown. They'd want to have a robot that can walk in there and open the doors, climb the stairs, and perform complex tasks. And it seems kind of far-fetched right now, but back in around 2007, DARPA also had the Grand Challenge, where the contest was to build a robotic car that could drive by itself. And the first year they had that competition, no one completed the course. And then here we are in 2014, where Google has cars that have driven autonomously all by themselves, hundreds of thousands of miles in San Francisco downtown and on highways. And now it's actually legal. There's a law in California that you can have an autonomous car driving on the highways. I think it's also in Nevada as well.
Yeah, that's really incredible because as we see the new innovation happening with artificial intelligence, with automation, with the ways that these robots and I think what was it, Amazon recently had a whole ad about the droids that are going to be delivering packages, as a proof of concept. I don't know if they're really going to do that in real life, but we're going to see more and more of this. In the Google car, the self-driving car is a great example of that. I want to circle back to Dawn and ask about, because robots are super complicated, right? You need a lot of resources, a lot of educational background to build some of these robots. And maybe, Andrew, you can prove me wrong later on. But Dawn, I want to ask you about Arduinos and Raspberry Pis, and can you explain to us what these things are, why they're important, and what makes them, accessible, and how is it making kind of these concepts around robotics more accessible to regular people?
Sure. I'll try to do the best I can at speaking plainly. Hopefully my sister's listening and won't give me some cues. But, we'll start with I'm going to start with Arduino. Arduino is an open source platform. It is a microcontroller. And in a way, all the things that we're talking about are computers. But, if you want to pare it down a bit, it's actually a microcontroller platform that was actually created to get folks who were either already tinkerers in electronics and to sort of add some intelligence to them. So you can write code to do something like make a traffic light that can respond to your hand wave, right? So I won't get too far into that. But what's interesting about Arduino is that it's entirely open source. The hardware is open source. The software is open source. Right now, you and I could go and make our own, version of an Arduino, and it could be based on current plans, and that's okay. That's really interesting because the platform is also for sale. And so, or when I say the platform, the controllers are for sale, but the actual IDE, the development environment in which you write code to program the creations with these microcontrollers is free and it's open source. So it's cross-platform. You can use it on the major platforms, Linux and Windows and Apple. And it has a tremendous following, an amazing community. And what's really interesting about it is, we're hearing this suddenly things like maker and maker culture and all those things, which, maybe in the 80s you just say an inventor, but the creative culture is really starting to become recognized with the mainstream, and there's a lot of implications for that because it goes from people who you might never have heard of and not known about any projects they're working on in their basement or in their garage, suddenly having access and public availability. So that's an Arduino. Raspberry Pi is a bit different. They tend to get compared, but they're not quite the same. Raspberry Pi is a small computer, and it's effectively designed or was aimed to get young people interested in programming. It runs with a Linux environment. And what's interesting about it is, it's $40 or under. There's 2 models out, and the first one was about $25 when it came out. The second one was $35, and they've kind of gone up since then. But the real interesting thing about them is people have, the hacker community or the creative community, it wasn't really targeted for, got a hold of this and start doing some interesting things that you might normally do on your computer, but also things that you might do with a microcontroller like Arduino. And while they're not the same thing, and there are some, workarounds to sort of make them work together, it's created a whole new segment of opportunities in terms of an industry where people are making boards, ways to extend it, ways to communicate. They're embedding them in things like robotics, but they're also doing, some quirky things that you might not think about with both. And so I think that what's interesting about it is they have just the sales alone. Raspberry Pi, I think, sold like 1 million units in its first year, probably more than that. So what it's doing is it's opening up opportunities for everyday people, not just folks who say are in graduate school or folks who are in college or folks who work for traditional industrial ventures. It's opening the opportunity for anyone to be able to think it and then build it, think it and create it, and to be able to extend that as well. All at a modest price when you think about it, depending on what your project is. And I think that it extends to robotics because you have the opportunity now to make a simple robot, but even more complex robots. The class of mine, I teach two different groups. One are high school students who are taking early college classes. Most of them come from, so-called underrepresented communities, African Americans, Latinos, and they all had never had any experience with electronics or programming. And, we were able to build a drone or a UAV and get it up and running and demo at the Apple Store. And it was a really awesome experience. And it really kind of got a lot of people curious because, many folks said, well, they need to learn math, they need to learn science, and didn't really believe that people without any previous experience could build a fully working drone. So I think it also adds a level of curiosity, but also a level of, confidence that you can build something that, maybe someone at Microsoft or otherwise Google is creating with a much larger budget.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I have been interested in Arduinos and Raspberry Pis since they came out, really early on. But I didn't have one because, there's sort of that whole thing that you need to get over to say, well, you know what, I'm going to just try this thing. I don't know very much about it, but I'm going to give it a shot. I'll just share what helped me get over that and what actually got my hands on my first Arduino, which I was able to extend that opportunity to my daughter as well. But I went to a hackathon that was put on by HackRight Academy, which is an organization that teaches women how to code. And they put on this hackathon. It was all focused on making robots and things with the Arduino board. So they gave us training. They gave us every team had an Arduino to play with. And so I brought my daughter to this hackathon. And so as we were looking at it, and I had never had any exposure to electrical engineering. I didn't even realize that there were diagrams that explained, the process of circuitry and wiring and transistors and what all those things do. But literally in one day, I was able to learn enough to make the Arduino blink lights or turn turn the what's it called, the thing that turns around, you know what it's called.
Potentiometer? There's a lot of but okay.
So there's a potentiometer. There was a potentiometer that you use to actually turn. You can turn it with your hands, but then there's also the thing that will literally spin around.
Oh, you're on a servo motor.
Yeah, a servo. So we got the servo turning. We got all that done in one day at the hackathon. And what it really solidified in my mind is that what these Arduinos are useful for is prototyping, concepts.
Absolutely.
Things that, things that you could imagine being able to do on a larger scale, with more power, but being able to prototype that concept, in your home with a microcontroller. And it blew my mind. And I was like, everyone needs to have exposure to this.
Hey, Ori, that's exciting.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Hey, Ori, that's exciting to hear. Because as you're talking about that, I think back when I was, a freshman taking electrical engineering classes. I had never really done any hands-on electronics on my own, and the way the curriculum was presented at the time, I didn't make the connection between the equations I was being taught with actual hardware, and it was it was a couple years or 2 or 3 years before I actually got a chance to build things. And so I think what you're saying about the Arduinos and what you and Don are talking about with Arduinos and the Raspberry Pis is just an incredible opportunity for kids to get exposed to doing creative things with computer hardware at an early age.
Yeah, Doctor, I think you're exactly right. I think what it's done is created this real low barrier of entry to the world of electronics. And I was like you when I took my engineering classes. I'm here doing these math equations and everything, and it never really dawned on me like how these equations relate to electronics per se, right? The hands-on type of things. And it was just in electronics. It was in electronics 1 course. I think some of the more advanced courses like electronics 1, electronics 2 took it a bit further, where you're actually like building and
right.
small robots and things like that. But even still, and this was mainly I had this course because I thought that I was being slick about taking, computer networking, and I'm thinking it's all about, networking and network administration and everything like that. But the actual name of the course was Computer Network Engineering, emphasis on engineering, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm taking all these courses on AC circuits, DC circuits, digital sequential logic, where we're doing things with, learning. How to code like these small microprocessors and things like that, wiring things on breadboards and everything like that. And so, but something like the Arduino, the Raspberry Pi, it would have been great to have. And I mean, even growing up, it would have been great to kind of have something like that. I think what they're doing with these and are great, and especially when I just actually got my hands on a Raspberry Pi recently. From winning a raffle at a this hacker conference. But what I like about it is that you can include these expandable modules to do, all sorts of other things. And this module that is connected to my Raspberry Pi actually gives me this real nice LED screen that has, switches and things like that, but it's actually it was actually built by the security company to wipe hard drives, to zero them out. So there's a small Python program running on it that is, pretty much runs this script that uses DD, and it actually goes through and it wipes any hard drive. It has a couple of USB connectors on the side. It's pretty slick. But I like this because not only is it small, it's compact, but it's actually exposing the electronics, the integrated circuits, the capacitors, you see some of the resistors. And so if somebody wants to look at this, and it actually makes you even more curious just by looking at it. Okay, so this is labeled this switch. Well, and so that piques somebody's curiosity, and it's not just a box with the on off button. Right,
mm-hmm.
And you can't really see any of the internals of what's going on. People buy computers and it just works, and I don't care about what's inside. But this thing actually is exposed. It lets you see the circuitry on it, and it makes you wonder, like, oh yeah, well, how does this actually work? And people can go from there. So in case you're just now tuning in, this is BITTechTalk, episode 52. This is Raspberries and Robots, Hacking the Hardware. And we're here with our guests, Dr. Andrew Williams and Dawn C. Hayes. If you have any questions for either one of our guests, go ahead and on Twitter, use the hashtag BITTechTalk, and we will actually be monitoring that for questions. So, Dr. Williams, I wanted to ask you about the difference. What is the difference between computer science and computer engineering? I know in your bio you have that you were a chair in electrical and computer engineering, and I know that in some schools they actually differentiate engineering and something like information science or something like. So is there a difference between the computer engineering, computer science, and if so, what is it?
So I was the department chair in computer science at Spelman College in Atlanta, historically black college for women. And Spelman is an undergraduate liberal arts institution, so they don't have an engineering program per se. They have a 3-2 engineering program where you can go 3 years at Spelman and 2 years at a engineering university like Georgia Tech or University of Michigan. Computer science focuses more on the theory behind computer software and algorithms, and computer engineering is concerned with both the computer hardware and the computer software. I think depending on the program you go into, you can get some of both. So I think I majored in electrical engineering, but then found out that I wanted to learn more about software, and my master's was in electrical and computer engineering, and my PhD focused on artificial intelligence with a lot of software in it and software engineering. And so I think you can go both ways, but I think it's a little easier if you come from a hardware background and you want to do the software because you understand the hardware better. But if you're just doing software, you really have to dig in and try to learn the hardware, which is not that difficult. It depends on if you want to learn the hardware so that you can actually design the circuitry for computers. But if you want to learn the hardware enough to be able to program it, it's not that difficult.
Gotcha. And we actually got a member on Blacks in Technology site. He does more with electrical engineering, and his name is Henry. And he always says that everything starts with layer one, right? With the physical aspect of everything, computers or whatever. So he really emphasizes the engineering side of it and the hardware side of it because I guess you can troubleshoot the software, but if there's an issue with hardware, right, you have to know that there's an issue with hardware. And so I always, anytime we have discussions on the site, and it has anything to do with really anything computers, he always brings, and he's an inventor as well, and he's a brilliant person. He always brings in, that, it's all about, it's layer one first. It's, the physical side of it, which I during my time obtaining my engineering degree, I love building stuff, and even though it was tedious at times, and you had to bring home a breadboard and a bunch of wires and some ICs, but it's definitely gratifying when you get a finished product or a finished project, and just being able to know that you're actually building something with your hands is kind of like the kind of old school where you're working with your hands and things like that. I think that's pretty gratifying as well.
Right, and I guess when you really look at it, it actually comes down to physics. You know, how the electrons are working, you know, how the materials are made, and, you know, all the engineering fields actually go into, I mean, a lot of them, like chemical engineering, you know, as well. But speaking of engineering, I saw a web article that talked about majors that pay you back, the top 10 majors, college majors to by salary potential, and they the top 10 were filled with the engineering majors, so and math. So the top one was petroleum engineering, second was actuarial, mathematics, the nuclear engineering, chemical engineering, aerospace engineering, electrical engineering, computer science, physics, and then mechanical engineering. Wow. And if you go down farther, there's even more engineering and then more math. And so it was very eye-opening, and that there's the job market for the STEM fields is wide open, and I hope young people that are listening realize that they can take their interest in, you know, learning more about, you know, computers and learning more about engineering to major in something that actually pays very well.
Yeah, I that's a great point, because, you know, when it comes down to it, you know, we work and we seek these careers so that we can support our family. So it makes sense to set yourself up so that you can have, you know, a very lucrative career. And engineering has been vastly underestimated, and how well it can set you up for the future. I was sitting around with some of my nephews last year, and we were all just talking, and I started talking about high frequency trade developers, the folks who develop the software that runs, you know, all of our trading systems for stocks and all those kinds of financial systems. And and I just mentioned in passing, yeah, these guys make $1 million a year, and their jaws just dropped open. They were like, "What?" And I was like, "You want me to show you news articles to prove it?" And they were like, "Look, you know." And so, so at least one of my nephews is now programming, and so the message, just get it across, and you know, young folks, they will hear it.
Yeah,
I want. Go ahead.
Can I say one thing on that point real quick?
Sure.
One of our graduates in computer engineering, she went to work for a software company making over $100,000 a year, just starting out with an undergraduate degree last year.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep, just starting. And, you know, it is so real. It is so real. I mean, I interview people all the time, and, you know, people are coming straight out of college and they're making six figures. It is an investment well worth your time. I want to ask a question, though. I'll direct it to Dawn about makeathons. You know, the work that you've been doing. I want you to just explain to us, you know, what a makeathon is, and, you know, how you got into organizing these programs.
Sure. Well, a makeathon is, first of all, I'll just say, so maker is sort of the trendy word now for saying hacker, or I guess inventor, creative, but they're all kind of saying the same thing. Some people are offended by sort of the negative connotations associated with the term hacker. So makers turned into sort of the culture-friendly term. But a makeathon is not that much unlike a hackathon, software hackathons, where people to get together and there might be a particular topic or a subject and basically produce something over a given period of time. How I started doing makeathons, the vision was that I was really interested in how people. I live in New York City. I was born and raised there. You know, I grew up not really realizing how rough New York was in the 80s. That it really, you know, takes a village to raise one experience, which is really great. And as I got older, and even in more recent time, I'd come pretty frustrated and felt like, well, I want to leave. I want to go someplace where there's a better quality of life. And the constant, thing in the back of your mind is, one, you have to make a difference where you are, and two, there's always going to be something, and New York is just a really great place to experiment and to be curious, and people you can be rewarded for that. So the Makeathon was designed twofold. One, to just expose people to emergent media art and technology, and to think about how those things could help us facilitate more intentional thinking around what happens in our communities. So you get together and you might never have done anything with electronics, and you might learn about soldering, you might learn about how to use an Arduino, you might learn how to program with a Raspberry Pi, and also things that may not even use those particular products, but how you can actually facilitate something. So an interesting example, not one that we use in the Makeathon, but is something called the air quality egg. And that was really born of a conversation among some folks who said, let's figure out how we can monitor air quality in our communities. And what was really interesting is it touched upon a lot of different things, from coming up with a project that's designed in terms of its hardware to how to make it work software-wise, to how to fund it. And it was successfully funded on Kickstarter. And that's just one example of how you can come together and apply coding and programming, but also apply actually making something and being able to gift that to the community, that they can go ahead and use that in either their everyday activities or in special cases. So the other thing that was important is to facilitate cross-border interactions, because I think a lot of times when we talk about things like technology and computer science and all the things that are trending, a lot of times we kind of leave those conversations in our minds in major communities or major big cities like New York or San Francisco, LA, even Atlanta. So, but we leave out a lot of communities. And then I think that we live in an age now where DIY, do it yourself, is huge. It's the industry, to reckon with, and there are a lot of amazing things that come out of that. So one thing that I found was missing is when I would go to conferences or I go to hackathons, software hackathons, or even when I go to maker spaces, which many of them are closed collectives that sometimes open themselves up to the public, and you can learn or interact about all these things, resources you might not otherwise have access to, but some are public as well. But they're almost always white, male, 20 to 40s. And I remember at one point I was visiting a maker space in a major city down south. I won't give the name, but you can probably guess. And, they had an open house. And it took about 15 to 20 minutes before anyone walked up to me and said, "Oh, you're here for the open house." And this is at a maker space. So when finally someone did approach me and ask me, another person came up to me, white male, and he said, "You can't possibly know anything about Arduino." And it was a real interesting experience. Wow. Because what he didn't know was that I had been teaching Arduino for 3 years already. What he didn't know was that, I came out of one of the top grad programs that introduced me to this. And most of the people in that program aren't by training a computer science or computer engineer. They're artists, right? So there was this need to sort of expose not only those who may not have access to the culture or understanding what these things are, but there's also a need to expose those who already are in the culture and to say, hey, look, you don't have to look this way to be involved in this. And so the other goal behind the Makeathons is to really get two people in a room who might not otherwise interact, whether it be a lawyer or, an engineer or a singer or a single mom, and to think about how they can take these skills they're learning and being exposed to and actually create something that they can, give to the community, feel good about it. Like, oh, look, today I created a web page, but that web page also is connected to, this sensor that can tell me how many cars pass by my block, right? So that's really important, and I think that in many of our, many hackathons are, engaged around trying to create the next, big thing or to give exposure to any of these prizes, and that's great. But there's not a lot of things for the everyday person who, might have a very set routine but is curious. So, Greg, you're talking about how you got access to a Raspberry Pi by, winning one in a lottery. But we need to start creating a culture around this stuff, and we need to sort of be okay with widening our understanding and our expectations of what it means to walk into a room and see someone who calls themselves a maker, or see someone who calls themselves an engineer or an artist, and to have the dialogue and the collaboration amongst that group, so that people say, well, you know what, I like hip hop, but I'm going to create my own box that's like networked and can create a Pandora-like station, and they should feel comfortable not necessarily having to fit into traditional silos of what it means to be, a geek or a maker or an engineer or scientist. So the makeathons are really aimed at that, and they're designed to get people thinking, get people collaborating that they may not otherwise interact with.
Wow, that is deep. I'm just thinking to myself, you got the gears in my brain moving. Like, you know what? We need to have another conversation about this in terms of ways that these technologies can be applied, to support, people's creative endeavors. Like a more deep dive into it, because man, it's what you're saying is so exciting.
Yeah,
I like it.
I remember when I first. I'm sorry, Dylan. I remember when I first actually kind of virtually met you when we were talking with some people from South by Southwest last year, and I was like really, really pulling for you because of this very thing that you talk about exposing people to different cultures and things like that. And hopefully, in the future, we can collaborate to bring some of these makeathons to our communities and really get the exposure to these people on the ground level.
If I can, I'd like to ask Don, what can we do, and how can we go about getting more kids exposed to this, and how can we work with your organization, or how can we just scale up what you're doing?
Sure. Well, first I'll say that working with kids is something that I think you have to meet them where they are. I think a lot of times, a lot of students I meet who are not in college yet are enrolled in programs that have really been aggressive about bringing them, for example, onto a college campus if they've never been on one. There's a really terrific public hackerspace in Brooklyn called Alpha One Labs, and, the founders of that particular makerspace are really they're really vested in making sure that anyone who's 18 and under can also attend makerspaces. A lot of makerspaces get pretty intimidated for liability purposes. And I think that, we need to be able to, at York College, where I teach, that's located in Jamaica in Queens, and it has a strong population of people that, again, don't look like what you see in conferences and things of that nature. So, Daniel Phelps really did a great job at starting a maker space on campus. So I think that we have to be willing to go where people are. That's the first thing, because not everyone's going to sort of already know like where Google is or know about Google Summer of Code. That's the first thing. I think the next thing is that we also have to use the tools that people are interested in and that they use. So social media is great, but there are some people who, aren't on social media or are not heavy users of it. And so they've got to have a place to come and hang out and feel safe and feel like it's okay. If I've never picked up a hammer, it's okay if I've never soldered before. So that's important. As far as partnering directly with Cool Labs, we're the primary goal in the next 6 months or so is to do two things. One is to partner with more organizations, ventures, and communities that want to host these makeathons and are willing to do it cross-border, so to do two-way streams online, but also have projects that we can think about, like what we have in common, and to be able to hack. So, for example, in Haiti, we talk about New York City and Haiti, particularly Port-au-Prince, both having, sanitation issues, but one is a culture thing, right? Here in New York, we have a lot of infrastructure, but, in Haiti, they don't have infrastructure. And so what is it that we can probably learn from each other, but also can build together? So trying to think about the things we have in common, and then, a lot of attention going to sort of what are the already existing local resources and pulling them in. So I know, for example, Bree Pettis, who is the founder of MakerBot, is really serious about, I'll borrow his word, blowing up education. And I think that we have to be willing to look at this a little bit differently and to be able to be comfortable with maybe not using the same traditional route and being okay with someone who maybe says, well, I'm not sure about computer science, but I like, and sort of figure out what it is they're interested in. So things like wearable tech have a interesting role in fashion. Things like drones are great. Are there ways we can use that for other things other than, say, surveillance and security? So I think we just have to be willing to take it from the perspective that people are already sort of exposed to. If we know that someone is interested in starting their own business, then we have to think about how do we have that conversation about how this can lead to a successful venture, right? So if I tell somebody, Adafruit is, I think they're well over $25 million in like 6 or 7 years of operation, and that was started by a young lady out of MIT. That can mean something. So I think those are the starting point. And I think the other part is being willing to, collaborate offline as well as online, but really being able to meet people where they are.
I think that's excellent. Hopefully in the future, with Blacks in Technology's new site redesign, we can help facilitate some of the things that you're doing, Dawn, with the makeathons and bring it to our community, so people can get more involved. And if you're tuning in, you're listening to the BITTechTalk episode 52. This is Raspberries and Robots Hacking the Hardware with our two guests, Dr. Andrew Williams and Dawn C. Hayes. Use the hashtag BITTechTalk if you want to tweet us any questions. And I want to direct this next question to Dr. Williams. You're the first African American to earn a PhD in engineering from the University of Kansas. You're also a professor. Distinguished Chair in Electrical and Computer Engineering at Marquette. But you're also an author, and you actually came out with a book called Out of the Box, Building Robots, Transforming Lives. Tell us about why you wrote the book, what's it about, and your experience with writing this book.
So the title Out of the Box has several meanings. One is literally I slept in a cardboard box as a baby, the youngest of 6 kids. From my dad was African American. He met my mom during the Korean War, and we lived in a 2-bedroom trailer. And so I didn't have a lot materially growing up, but I used my imagination to make my own toys and things like that. But the story goes on to basically tell my story of how, through my faith in God and support of my family and local church, was able to overcome quite a few obstacles, including my mom having a mental illness. And so I wanted to tell the story to young people about how I was able to succeed and how education and technology, specifically engineering and computing, has really benefited me. But the last part of the book, I talk about how I started the Spellbots at Spelman College 10 years ago. After my wife and I read the book, The Purpose-Driven Life, I realized that I needed to find a place to work where I could help African American students reach their full potential. And I had started at University of Iowa, and I think in 2 years I had taught, in 5 years I had taught only 2 black students. And so I knew I wanted to go to a place that had more African American students. But I was Out of the Box also speaks to not letting people define you in a box of what you can and can't do. And when I was working with African American young ladies at Spelman, a lot of them had come from high schools. Most of them had come from high schools that didn't have any computer science classes. And I can only think of one that had some type of programming. I think it was Flash programming. But we ended up becoming the first, or they ended up becoming the first all-female African-American team to compete in the international RoboCup robot soccer competition in 2005. That year, when they competed against graduate schools from around the world. There were 24 teams from around the world, 4 of them from the U.S., including Carnegie Mellon, University of Pennsylvania, and University of Texas, Austin, big engineering graduate schools, and Spelman being an undergraduate liberal arts college for women, a historically black college. And so they were able to qualify in 2009. That was with 4-legged robots. In 2009, we competed in the RoboCup Japan Open in Osaka, Japan, in 2-legged humanoid robot soccer in RoboCup, and they were able to tie Fukuoka Institute of Technology in the championship match. And just to see these young ladies, similar to what Don was saying, achieving in a space where they don't fit the stereotype of what an engineer, computer scientist look like, and they're still going on and still great role models. But that was the message that I wanted to get out there with my book.
Excellent. And you can get this book on Amazon. I got my copy, I think maybe a couple of weeks ago. Started reading it. It's a great read so far. I haven't finished it yet, but I definitely want to get through this book. Has some incredible, life experiences that you had to go through, and some great lessons in it as well. So can you tell us a little bit more? I know you touched on it a little bit about the Spellbots. How did you form this group, and what was the experience like working with these young women?
So the best way is to read my book, but because we only have a few more minutes, I think. But when I went to Spelman, I looked at the students like I would look at any other student. And in fact, my wife was the one that really encouraged me to consider working at Spelman when I started interviewing at HBCUs, because, as you know, women are very underrepresented in STEM, and I can think of maybe a couple when I was going through engineering as an undergrad, and so. But my wife just encouraged me because I have a son and 2 daughters, and she said, don't you want to have our daughters working with a professor that really is trying to help them reach their full potential? But I had a lot of fun working with these students over the years, and it was just a blessing. I treated them like I would treat my daughters, and just great to see them, some of them going on to graduate school and becoming successful in their fields. Some going to Apple, Google, other companies that are challenging to get into. But again, one of the reasons why I chose robotics to help teach is because I learned that not everyone has the same learning style, and robotics, it's visual, it's hands-on, and the students, were able to do some great things with robots and computing.
Nice. And I know I mentioned that we had a 1-hour time. I mean, we actually have longer than that, but we kind of teeter around an hour, a little bit longer than an hour. So if you guys can stay on, I just got a couple of more questions to throw past you. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay. All right. So I want to throw this out to both of you, and I'll let Don answer first. But with a lot of organizations focusing on coding, do you think it's important that that we come up with orgs, or we have organizations infuse hardware into the curriculum?
Yeah, definitely. I think the future is already here, and that sounds really cliche, but it's true. The future, let's say it like this: 15 years ago, everyone was throwing out, software is hot, content is king, and hardware is kind of seen as like a stepchild. That's not the case anymore. If you look at the startups and the companies that are really the driving force in communities around this country and even around the world, many of them are centering around hardware. Even if you think about the hot topics from data visualization to Internet of Things to 3D printing. I mean, these are things that even 5 years ago, we weren't having this conversation around actually being able to have a career around it. So, and not just a career, but to be able to create a product. Like I said, Adafruit has only been around for a few years, and, they're probably one of the most heavily used sites for DIY hobbyists in electronics, as well as those who are building larger projects. I actually have my laptop open, and I have about 25 tabs. And out of that 25 tabs open, more than half of them are hardware-oriented ventures. We have hardware accelerators that are getting started. One is called Bolt in Boston. And these are the type of opportunities that are there's plenty of opportunity, but the point is that where before, if you were looking at, say, a Y Combinator or Techstars, these are all sort of what I could call like micro-equity accelerators. You were finding a lot of venture capitalists, for example, interested because it's low overhead and it's something that if you put it out, you can make a lot of money off of it without having to invest too much. But we can't really move forward without thinking about the physical design. And there are, to prove that point, there are universities, MIT's Media Lab, New York University, UCLA, a couple of programs that have entire programs, graduate programs dedicated to this, entire research labs dedicated to this. And you can't ignore it. You really can't. I think it will look a little bit different from what we've seen in the past, because I think hardware itself, or what we mean when we talk about hardware design, is definitely changing and will continue to change. It's something you'll have to constantly keep up with, which, not to say that wasn't the case before, but, before it's kind of like looking under the hood. And I think today's startups and today's careers will be largely based around what you can make, and you'll have to understand a little bit of both if you really want to sort of flourish in the future. So I think it's important to understand both, even if we're talking about maybe a different approach from what we've seen in the past.
I really agree with Don, and that's part of the reason why I'm excited about robotics. I mentioned Bill Gates' vision of personal robot in every home, and that's the vision that I talk to my students about. Is why not us become part of the push for creating low-cost robots that can help kids with childhood obesity? Why not we be the ones that put a robot in home that helps tutor kids in math or reading? Why not? These students start companies where they're the Apple of robots, or the Microsoft of robots, because, like Don said, now the access to hardware and inexpensive hardware, as well as 3D printers, give us the ability to prototype and make things quickly, which we couldn't have done, just even a few years ago.
Yeah, that's what I love about the Blacks in Technology community, is the diversity of disciplines amongst our members, right? So we have people that are inventors that are more on the electrical engineering side. We have mechanical engineers, as well as the software engineers and the developers. But what I like about it most is we don't emphasize on just one small part of technology, when technology as a whole is a very, very broad topic. And so, like I said, I talked to one of my members almost daily. His name is Henry, and this guy always talks about layer one, the hardware, resistors and capacitors and things like that. And it's even when you look at companies like Google that are now making these acquisitions these other companies, they're acquiring other companies that are into robotics, that are into artificial intelligence. And I think Apple recently, they've made quite a few acquisitions along those lines as well. I mean, we have to start looking at the value of, robotics, hardware, and that aspect of it, so that we can jump into these careers and start making a difference within our community, because we might have a totally different mindset on how something should be built to even help our communities out, that some people who don't have the same type of experiences that we have might even think about. So I think that's definitely those are both definitely great answers.
Yeah, and you touched upon something about something that we're beginning to look at too, is having culturally aware robots, because right now a lot of the research is done for robots that can interact with a generic person, and usually that's a person in the majority. And what we want is to have robots that can be culturally responsive.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. And speaking of Henry, he actually sent in some questions that I just want to throw one of the questions out, and then I want to ask one more question from the both of you, and then kind of wrap it up. We're a little bit over an hour, so this is directed at any one of you who can answer. And one of his questions is, can the theory of robotic control of mechanized arm movements be ported over to large boom-type movements without some form of external stabilization? If so, could something like a Raspberry Pi or Arduino be used to control a boom loader arm? Anybody want to take a shot at that?
I'll answer, but if Dr. Williams wants to go first, that's no problem.
Oh, no, that's okay. Go ahead.
Well, the short answer is yes,
okay.
But, and then 3 dots. And in that case, I would probably talk to you more about the Arduino than a Raspberry Pi, only because, and again, this is where that conversation comes in terms of, well, what's the difference? And I know there's been a lot of comparisons, but they're really not the same, although there are lots of projects that try to interface the two. So yeah, my short answer is yes, but, and if you want more clarification, I'd be happy to do that. But I'm very verbose, so I'm not sure I can answer that within the time limit there. Maybe that's a forum for us.
Okay. So maybe at the end of the podcast, you throw out, how Henry can get in contact with you, because the reason he's asking is because he's looking for a small controller that would also sense stabilization errors and provide corrective feedback near real time. That's what he's going to use it for. So we'll let you, give out contact information at the end, and then Henry can contact you offline.
Okay.
All right. Great. So last question. I want to ask both of you, what are some cool projects that you've been working on? And I'll let Dr. Williams go first. What are something, within the field of robotics or AI that you've worked on that you can talk about? I don't know if there's anything that top secret or anything, but
oh yeah, I mentioned them at the beginning. One is a humanoid robot exercise coach, and we have the participants in our study wearing Nike Fuel Bands, and we want the robot to be able to use the physical activity data from the wearable technology to provide adaptive coaching along with motivational interviewing. So we're actually actively doing experiments right now, and I'll be presenting some of our pilot study data at the Human Robot Interaction Conference in Germany in March, a paper that I got accepted. That's one project, and the other one is, like I said, the 3D printed teen size humanoid robot that we have that we're hoping to qualify for the humanoid robot soccer competition to be held at RoboCup in Brazil this summer. But in addition to that, we have an app that runs on an Android phone that connects to the head of the robot, and it displays different emotions, and we're programming the speech recognition from the phone to carry on dialogue with emotion, so that we want the robot to be able to play sports with kids interactively and be able to talk and express emotions while it's doing that.
Excellent. This sounds pretty exciting. What about you, Dawn? What projects are you working on?
Way too many projects. So I'll just say, I'll talk about one thing that's not exactly a tech project, but it's again about facilitating more culture and community interaction. So right now, a colleague of mine are working on something called Brooklyn Geek Week, and the goal of that is obviously to facilitate a gathering of folks who are, like all of us, discussing our projects, doing really interesting things around not just technology. Geeks are these days we talk about technology, but geek obviously can be anyone who's just really excited and really sort of well versed in what they do. But we're looking to do that in New York City to start right after June 21st. And New York has this thing called Make Music New York on the first day of summer. So we're looking to do that. And part of the goal was it's not only for Brooklynites, but if you come to New York, you'll hear some people say Brooklyn is NYC. I mean, there's a huge creative class, creative culture that's being just coming out of Brooklyn and basing themselves there, everything from Etsy to MakerBot. All these folks are really introducing a new culture, a new way of doing things, a new way of running startups. So we want to be engaged in that, but we also want it, again, to sort of showcase those who may not know about, especially those who, don't really look like who you expect or who you stereotype as being a hacker. So,